What's cracking, everybody? XehrFelrose here, bringing you some Pokemon Go Battle League content. Today's video, the Great League Remix is coming back. And with it, we got a fresh ban list from the current season. Look at how nicely this ban list looks. It's got Morpeko on it, got Drapion on it, got a Azumarill on it. Got Lapras, got Weezing, I'm going out of order. But they put my man Blastoise on the ban list, Golisopod, Credilli. You got all kinds of stuff that is actually relevant to the current meta, giving us a ban list that actually makes sense, which is one of the things they've been struggling with for a little while with Remix Cups, I'm going to be honest. But happy to see that they finally seem like they've got the ban list stuff together. They actually delayed the release of the ban list until just a little bit ago. To make sure that it was current. So, as always, what we're going to do is we're going to jump in with the rankings here and pick a few solid picks that I think are going to do really well, at least first thing in the meta, and then we're going to go over 5 teams that I think are going to be really solid. So first up here, we are going to have our top rankings, including these Ghosties, Corsola, Dusknoir, and Grumpig. And the thing that I like about this meta is, you see the score, there's nothing here that is drastically higher than everything else, right? We start off at 94.9, which the number itself is basically how does this thing do against everything else that's eligible in the meta. So obviously your 94.9 is going to be good out of your total 100 score, but everything else being close to that means that we have a balanced meta that hopefully doesn't have any single most dominant Pokemon like we used to have with Vigoroth. There we go. I was trying to think of the name. It's been so long since we've seen him. Now, I think the Diggersby, low-key, looks super solid in this cup. It's a very nice safe switch. You can always get something out of this Pokemon, and then you're going to want to have that, if you're going to use it, maybe something with a fairy like Tinkaton or something that is going to be able to deal with things like Pangoro, Primeape, some of its bigger issues. Guzzlord, as always, if you look at the top meta, is going to be solid. You have, Corsola, Dusknoir, Grumpig, and it's very strong into almost everything else on this list that's not a fairy. So if it's not fighting or fairy, Guzzlord's going to do really well into it, I think. So I don't mind it. Claydol also survived the ban list. It's down here. It's very consistent. Very good safe swappy kind of Pokemon. The Claydol Furret core is good. Tinkaton, because of how new it is also not banned, so that's going to be a thing that exists, unfortunately. I think that it would have been a good thing to ban it because of how strong and popular it is. It's just, it wasn't released in time for it to catch the list. But that being said, we go a little bit further down here. Steelix is in the meta, which is always a strong pick. I think I kind of like Golurk. Toxapex here is the bane of my existence, but also one of the Pokemon that is going to be very consistent and strong and very bulky, and it's going to work very well with something like that Guzzlord, which you would want to be able to have against, something against fairies and fighting, like we said. Now, Registeel, Galarian Moltres, there's things like Runerigus, Sandslash is on here. There's a lot of things on here that could be okay, but I think that they need to be able to play into this top meta. So depending on how the meta evolves, we'll see. But let's take a look at the first team here, which is going to be centered around that Toxapex. Let me just find my button to turn it all back on here. Toxapex double normal looks like an interesting play here, in my opinion, as Toxapex's worst fear in this cup is essentially going to be ground types, and it's going to be the ever so problematic ghost types that exist, right? And so you have double normal. You could definitely sub out the Diggersby for something that's a little bit better into the ground types. You could honestly pick from the litter here, to be honest. Anything here that's good. You could do Jellicent. That'd be a solid pick here. Or you could try perhaps the there's not a whole lot of answers to I'm realizing this in real time. There's not a whole lot of answer to ground types. Quagsire could be good here. There's basically, you just want to cover for ground and ghost. Those are the two biggest issues that Toxapex is going to have. And Steel is nice too, which is why we have Diggersby. But this team gets some pretty solid letter grades off of PvPoke. Not that you can see them through the massive sprites on the screen here. But overall, this team has a lot of play. There's not really a whole ton of things that just outright beat this team either, which is nice. And even if you find your Diggersby, for example, matched up against something like a Alolan Sandslash, it can still hit back with double super effective fire punches. And honestly, Galarian Moltres might be here and there, but I don't expect to see a whole lot of Ariados, Aurorus, Alolan Sandshrews, Gigaliths, and the rest of this meta this team has play into in some way, shape, or form. So I like this team. You could certainly sub some things in and out here, but overall, generally, I think it's a strong team. So let's take a look at another one. Right, so Tinkaton survived the ban list. That's something that we've kind of come to terms with, and this is a team around it that I think will do well. So typically, the ghost types pair very well with fairies, and Tinkaton in the lead here. Most of its counters, except from Claydol, have kind of been banned, right? So it's a pretty free thing in this meta for the most part. Obviously, there are still going to be some things like Toxapex is a little bit of a pain for it. But if you look at the rest of this meta, you know, you're still, like, Diggersby is probably its biggest issue at this point, right? And then you're going to see something like, you know, people might literally just throw the Alolan Marowak out there to try and counter it. But that's all the same, because that's what you have Jellicent and Dusknoir there for, is those are going to be able to cover for the issues that Tinkaton has the most problems with. And overall, in general, this team is going to do very well. Tinkaton actually outbulks Corsola and is able to beat it neutrally now in this also, which I did not know until just this moment when I looked at it. But the total list of things that this team loses to, not very big. Everything in this meta is just, you have play into it. It's just great. Like Amoonguss, you might see some, right? But Togedemaru, Electrode, Mew, Roserade, Magnezone, like there are things in here that are probably not going to come up until like the meta has become specifically targeted at certain things to the point where it's evolved, and it's not the same as it would be on day one. But day one, I feel like this could be a super, super solid team. And now we're going to take a look at team number 3. Now, we were talking earlier about the Guzzlord. I like this team a lot with Guzzlord. Spiritomb is a very interesting safe swap to me, because Sucker Punch and Rock Tomb is just a deadly combination. Being able to get to those Rock Tombs and have the fast move damage of Sucker Punch is really nice. But Swalot pairs very well with dark types in general, and so I'd like to hopefully see this team have play, as Swalot does well enough into Tinkaton that I think that you could certainly, you know, maneuver around it. But if you don't like Swalot, you could certainly do something like a Claydol or your Toxapex if you want to in the lead. I just don't want to reuse Toxapex from the other team. But overall, this team has a lot of play. Carbink is hopefully something that we don't see a ton of. Other than that, though, Thievul, Bastiodon, Aurorus, Wylus, like there's a lot of things here that, again, I'm not going to see a whole lot of. And there's something on this team that has play into the rest of the meta. And I'm assuming you can... I just sitting here looking at like 16 through 20, assuming you could see it. But yeah, the list of things that this team loses to in this meta are very small. So at that point, it just becomes very specifically about the alignment that you have and if your team can handle it or not. But very strong team here. Let's check out another one here in the Great League Remix. Right, bringing back Diggersby this time. It's on the safe switch with a Pangoro closer. Togetic Pangoro looks like a very strong core in this meta. If you don't see that thing called Toxapex, you'd be fine. If you don't like Togetic on the lead, or if you don't like Pangoro, I think that you could swap Pangoro out for a Claydol. I think that would be a very strong change here you could make. But Pangoro has such a huge amount of offensive firepower in its moveset with close combat, and it also gets to the moves very quickly, making it a very strong and effective closer. You're basically using Diggersby to try and lure out a Primeape or something that would be able to beat the lure out a fighter essentially, so that Togetic can take care of it. But if we find ourselves seeing a lot less of the fighters, then I would think that maybe we could try and pivot to a dark type safe switch or something else that might be a little bit more tuned for the meta. But straight Bs on PvPoke is pretty solid considering how little bulk this team gets with Pangoro. So generally speaking, like I said, you're not going to see a whole lot of things that are going to be common in this meta. Cresselia is probably the most meta thing that I'd expect to see, and even then, I don't know that you're going to see a lot of it because of all the ghosts that are running around. So, very strong team, I think, and I would like to see if anyone could make a good Togetic team work, because Togetic is like... it's such a good fairy. It just needs to stay away from certain things. But having Psyshock makes it such a good lead because it can hit back with those super effective Psyshocks into the poisons that give it so much trouble. But let's take a look at team number 5. You got my boy Hakamo out here. Now, I've specifically put this team here for Hakamo because I like it. And I think that it might be decent. Because if you look at the top meta, once again, right? It has play into the Ghost, even though it's a fighting type. Most of its damage is from Dragon. You have the Grumpig, which is a problem for it, that we have answers to. We've also got, there's just a lot of things that are lower down on the rankings, right? That Hakamo could do very well into. And I think that it's got a chance, but this is a very much a, how's the meta looking today kind of team. Like, Hakamo only does so well into certain things and then kind of gets shafted depending on how the meta looks. So if you're seeing a lot of things like, you know, fairies in the back, a lot of Tinkatons, right? Like if they're not in the lead, you see them in the back, might be not as great. But this team does, however, cover for the fairies very well in that it, you know, you just have for it to safe switch out into in a bad lead, and then you hopefully draw out their fairy or their Tinkaton with the Furret, and then let Hakamo sweep, because it's got enough bulk to be dangerous, has Brick Break, and Claydol and Hakamo make a pretty decent pairing here in this meta, with not a lot of dominant flying types to be spoken of. Now, Primeape could be a problem, Medicham, like there's some things here that, yes, could be a problem, but there are things that I'm not sure are going to be very common until the meta has evolved to a point where very specific things have started to dominate. This is a very broad, open meta, so at first, it's very hard to just target certain things because of how wide and diverse it might be, but once the meta has started to settle, the team like this might just do well enough. So that is going to do it for me for today in this video. Let me know in the comments if any of these teams or something you guys want to try, if you got a different team you want to try. Very interested to see, because your boy is down bad, and I need some elo, and this hopefully is the cup to do it. And with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thank you as always. Bye-bye.